Good day everyone, I am Christine Jane G.S. Torres of 2B1 and I will be introducing the lesson 2 which is the Larsen-Priemann's the grammar translation method. So under the grammar translation method, we have teacher. Teacher is a centered approach. When we say centered approach, the learners focus on the instruction from the instructor to teacher. Next is students. Students learn grammatical rules and then apply those rules by translating sentences between the target language and the native language. When the student learn grammatical rules, they are translating it in from their target language into their native language in order to understand and apply it easily in the real situation. Under the grammar translation method, we have cognates. Cognates are words often inherited from a shared parent language but may also involve borrowings from some other language. It is also reserved for words that exist in two different languages and have the same root or origin. It can be spelled exactly the same, but the accent or pronunciation is different, but the meaning is the same thing in both languages. For example, possibility in English and posibilidad in Spanish. So just remember that the cognates are two words in two different language that has almost the same spelling and same meaning, but when it comes to pronunciation or accent, it can be different. Phrasal verbs is also under grammar translation method wherein a two-word verb consisting of verb and its particle. For example, verb plus preposition or verb plus adverb. And when we use it together, usually take on a different meaning to that original verb. For example, put away, fill out, get back, back up, come on, break up, and whatsoever. So if we're going to put it in a sentence, so let's have John put his book away. The phrasal verbs are put away. As I've said, the phrasal verb can be separatable. So when we separate the put into away, the direct object can be put between the verb put and its particle away. So we have here proponent of the grammar translation method, which is Prof. Karl Plotz in 1819 to 1881. It's just said that the translation method is used when you're studying rules of grammar of your target language or L2 to compare the syntax of L2 to the native or target language. So as we can see, the learning of the student will be rote learning because it focuses on the rules of the language only. That's all for me. Thank you.
Lesson 2, Reviewing the Principle. The principles of grammar translation method are organized below by answering the 10 questions posed in Chapter 1. Not all questions are addressed by the grammar translation method. We will list all the questions, however, so that a comparison among the methods we study will be easier for you to make. 1. What are the goals of teacher who use the grammar translation method? Let us first review the meaning of grammar translation method. It is a method of teaching foreign language from classical method of teaching Greek and Latin, wherein the class taught through their mother tongue. According to the teachers who use the grammar translation method, a fundamental purpose of learning language is to be able to read literature written in the target language. To do this, students need to learn about the grammar rules and vocabulary of the target language. In addition, it is believed that studying another language provides students with good mental exercise, which helps develop their minds. 2. What is the role of the teacher? What is the role of the students? The roles are very traditional. The teacher is the authority in the classroom. The students do as she says, so they can learn what she knows. Teachers acts as model, conductor, instructor, guide, and controller, while the students only imitates what the teacher says. Teacher provides all the information to the student, so basically the student just follow the instruction given by the teacher, while the students have accurate and rapid response to the instruction of the teacher. 3. What are the characteristics of the teaching, learning, or learning process? Students are taught to translate from one language into another. Often, what they translate are readings in target language about the aspect of the culture of the target language community. Students study grammar deductively. They are given the grammar rules and examples are told to memorize them and asked to apply the rules to other examples. They also learn grammatical paradigms such as verb, conjugations, and memorize native language equivalents for target language vocabulary words. 4. What is the nature of student-teacher interaction? What is the nature of student-student interaction? Most of the interaction in the classroom is from teacher to students. There is a little student initiation and little student interaction. The students learn a lot of vocabulary. It develops reading, writing, their writing skills, but poorly develop their speaking skills. 5. How are the feeling of the students dealt with? There are no principle of method which relate to this area, but the behavior, anxiety, and self-esteem have great effect in the language acquisition. How is the language viewed? How much is the culture viewed? Literary language is considered superior to spoken language, and it is developed the language to student study. Culture is viewed as consisting of literature and fine arts. How they view the target language may also affect how they learn the target language. What areas of language are emphasized? What language skills are emphasized? Vocabulary and grammar are emphasized. Reading and writing are the primary skills and the student work on. There is much less attention given to speaking and listening. Pronunciation receives little if any attention. Because of the setting where the students only imitate what the teachers instruct them. 8. What is the role of students' native language? The meaning of the target language is made clear by translating it into students' native language. The language that is used in the class is mostly the students' native language. 9. How is evaluation accomplished? Written tests in which students are asked to translate from their native language into the target language or vice versa are often used. Questions about target culture and questions that ask students to apply grammar rules are also common. 10. How does the teacher respond to student errors? Having the students get the correct answer is considered very important if students make errors or do not know an answer. The teacher supplies them with the correct answer. It is crucial for the students having a low self-esteem that approach of the teacher must be encouraging to do better than before. Thank you.
Example of audiolingual method. First, use of a target language communicatively. Teachers want their students to be able to use the target language communicatively because the purpose of language learning is to learn how to use the language to communicate. And if it's used to communicate, it means The students the students are learned and they can use it comfortably. Number 2, students should overlearn. In order to use the language to communicate, they believe that students need to overlearn the language to learn to use it automatically without stopping to think. It means when overlearning a language would probably make the student less hesitant when using the target language, and it is good because you can see that the student is learning the target language. Number 3, language learning is a process of habit formation. So their students achieve this by forming new habits in the target language and overcoming the old habits of their native language. So basically, the more often something is repeated, the stronger the habit and the greater the learning. It means the target language when the target language is became the habit of the student, they can use it well, and we can see that they are learning. So next is the rules. So as you can see in the picture, in this slide, teacher's role: model, conductor, instructor, guide, and controller. So the teacher is like an orchestra leader, directing and controlling the language behavior of the students. Uh, it she is also she is also responsible for providing her students with a good model for imitation. So since the learner's role is the imitators, they follow the teacher's directions and respond as accurately and as rapidly as possible. Since yun nga, the teacher's role is the model, so the teachers must give the students accurate examples and liable ideas na 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 kailangang i-imitate ng learners. So next is the interaction between teacher and students. So there is student interaction in chain drills, or when students take different role in dialogues, but this interaction is teacher directed. So what is teacher directed? Most of interaction is between the teacher and the students and is initiated by the teacher. So ang ibig sabihin niyan ay yung the way of the teachers to teach the students is in interaction, and the student should answer the teacher rapidly when using the target language, so that the teacher can see that the student is learning. So the teaching learning process. So new vocabulary and structural patterns are presented through dialogues. Dialogues are learned through imitation and repetition. Drills are conducted based upon the patterns present on the dialogue. So, ito yung process na kung saan yung students will have a positive reinforcement, have a positive response when using the target language. So next is, no grammatical rules will be ever taught. Grammatical patterns induced from the example. So Grammar is induced from the examples given. Explicit grammar's rules are not provided. So a teacher can the te- and the teacher can teach the grammar rules explicit. Explicit it means expose expose yung expose yung grammatical rules. So when teaching grammatical rules, the teacher must induce it induce it to the example from the example, so that yung estudyante ay hindi malito kung kailan nila kailangan gamitin yung grammatical rules. So next is language, unique system, and culture, everyday behavior and lifestyle of a target learner. So nakasabi dito, the view of language in the audiolingual method has been influenced by descriptive linguists. Every language is seen as having its own unique system. The system comprises several different levels: phonological, morphological, and syntactic. Each level has its own distinctive patterns. So, in every language na aaralin ng learner ay iba-iba yung kailangang way para matutunan yung language. Yun nga, iba-iba yung system. Depende na lang din siguro sa estudyante kung ano yung strengths and weaknesses niya when learning a language, when learning the target language. Pero make sure na matututunan ng students ang target language. So, culture. Ito naman, everyday speech is emphasized in the audiolingual method. The level of complexity of the speech is graded, however, so that the beginning students are presented with only simple patterns. Cultures consist of the everyday behavior and lifestyle of the target language speakers. So, yun. Sabi dito depende yung yung bilis ng pagkatuto ng student, nakadepende sa culture, sa ginagalawan niya sa kanyang pang-araw-araw. Tagalog. Yun. So, babalikan natin yung mga dating lesson. Merong nabanggit na sa social status. When mas mataas yung status mo, mas mabilis kang matututo ng target language kung ang language man ginagamit yung laging ginagamit sa pang-araw-araw. So parang ganun din dito. Mas mabilis kang matututo kung yung language ay i-apply mo sa iyong culture, sa everyday behavior, sa lifestyle. So number 8, sound system and grammatical pattern over vocabulary. Vocabulary is kept to a minimum while the students are mastering the sound system and grammatical patterns. Sound system. In grammatical pattern is not as the same as a sentence. For instance, underlying the following this sentence is the same grammatical pattern. So, yung grammatical pattern ay yung alam nating yung subject, verb, direct object, and subject, verb, or subject plus verb or adverb. Yun yung pinaka-basic na dapat alamin natin sa grammatical patterns. So, yun. Next na is the oral The oral and oral skills receive more attention. So, the natural order of skills presentation is adhered to listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So, the oral and oral, yung oral ay yung speaking, yung oral ay listening skills. What students write, they have first been introduced to orally. Pronunciation is taught from the beginning, often by students working in language laboratories on discriminating between members of minimal pairs. In pronunciation, yung is the one, it is the best example here, I think, because pronunciation is great, tinututukan yan pagdating sa language, and lalo na kung ang students ay using the students are using the target language in pronunciation. Number 10, the native language is the target language are separated. So yan, the habits of the student's native language are taught to interfere with the students' attempts to master the target language. Therefore, the target language is used in the classroom, not the student's native language. Contrastive analysis between the student's native language and the target language will reveal where a teacher should expect the most interference. So, students are forced to use the target language in a classroom. Basically, when learning target language, native language should minimize, because sabi nga dito, native language can interfere when learning the target language. I'm CJ Naba, and those are the principles of audiolingual method. Thank you.
The topic is all about techniques and grammar translation method. It was already explained to us and we already know the principles of it. Now we will proceed to the techniques in grammar translation method. So, in translation of literary passage, the students will be given a passage. The passage can be an excerpt from a book or a composition written by the teacher. The passage should have an emphasis on vocabulary and grammar structure. The students then will be tasked to translate the passage, which is written in target language, into their native language. If the students will encounter idioms or the like, they don't have to translate it literally. For example, the student have encountered the idiom piece of cake. Of course, it doesn't mean that it's referring to the piece of cake. In short, the students will only need to show that they really did understand the passage and what the passage wants to convey. For example of this is doing an essay about a story that you have read, or writing a reflection paper or reaction paper about the movie or story that you have read. The passage can be done in written or spoken form. So, the second technique is the reading comprehension questions. Here, the students will answer in the target language based on their understanding of the reading passage. Usually, this technique is composed of 3 groups of questions. The first group will focus on informations about the story, for example, the main character, who is the protagonist, who is the antagonist, or whatsoever. And the second set of questions will be answered by the inferences of the students. This will assess the capacity of the knowledge the student got when he or she is reading the said passage. The third set of questions are answered by perceptions, which relates to the experiences of the readers or the students. There are times that students will only read the passage without really getting what it wants to convey. This technique is really helpful for teachers in assessing if the child has understood or has gotten any idea of what he or she is reading all about. The third technique is antonyms and synonyms. I believe that this is very common to all of us because even when we were still in our primary level, our teachers will always get words from the stories that we all have read and ask us to find its antonyms or synonyms. This is really helpful to improve the vocabulary of the student. Next is the cognates. The students are asked to familiarize the cognates. Cognates are words with almost the same origin. For example, the word possibility of an English is also the same as the posibilidad of Spanish. Because there are lots of cognates and words that sounds like cognates, it will be really helpful to the students and the teachers because if they encounter words that is almost similar to the cognates that they already know, it will be a lot more easier for them to understand the new unfamiliar word they have encountered. This is the deductive application of rules. In this technique, the students will be given rules and examples, and once the student understands the rule, they will be asked to apply it to some different examples. By this, the vocabulary of a child or a student will be improved because he or she knows the rule, understands the rule, and is able to use it in some other examples or in some other scenarios. The next technique is fill in the blanks exercise. Students are given sentences with words missing in it. This will assess how broad the memory of a child is. This will test if he remembers anything about the passage that was given to them. If he had read it and he already understood what was written into it or what it wants to convey, surely there are words that will be stuck on his head that he will be able to use whenever there are fill in the blank situation or fill in the blanks exercises. Next is the memorization. In memorization, the students will be given set of words written in target language with its native language equivalent. These given words and meanings will be memorized by the students. If the student already know the meaning of the said word in their native language, it will be easier for them to understand it whenever they have to encounter such word. It is really helpful because if the student fully understands the word that was given to them in the language that is comfortable to them, which is their native language, it will be more possible that the knowledge he got or the definition of that language will be stored in his or her long-term memory. The next is use words in a sentence. To assess if the students really understand the meaning of the new vocabulary they have learned, they will be asked to make up sentences where the vocabulary they got from the passage will be present. The best way to assess knowledge is to try to let the students use the word that they've got from the passage into sentences. If they truly understand the meaning of the word, they will be able to use it properly in sentences. It is always a must to provide a proof that you understand something in order for others to believe you. If you put the word properly or use the word properly in the sentence, it will serve as a clear indication that you truly understand the meaning of the word. So the last technique is composition. In composition, the teacher will give the students a topic to write in target language. The topic will still be based on the passage given. This composition is the best way to compile all the knowledge that you've got from the passage. Considering that the topic will be given to you will still be based on the passage, and you will be able to use a lot more techniques that was mentioned to write this composition of yours. An example of this composition is an essay. So I think that's all. Thank you for listening and have a good day.
Good afternoon to each and everyone, especially to our special teachers or tolits. I am Mark Libar and I am here to present the lesson 3, which is the direct method. Introduction. As with the grammar translation method, the direct method is not new. Its principles have been applied by language teachers for many years. Most recently, it was revised as a method when the goal of instructions became learning on how to use another language to communicate. Since the grammar translation method was not very effective in preparing students to use the target language communicatively, the direct method became popular. And this direct method has one very basic rule. No translation is allowed. In fact, the direct method receives the name from the fact that meaning is to be conveyed directly in the target language through the use of demonstration and visual aids, with no recurse to the student's native language. And by studying this direct method, we will now try to come to an understanding on the direct method by observing an English teacher using it in a scuola media or lower level secondary school. Class in Italy. The class has 30 students who attend English class for 1 hour, 3 times a week. The class we observe is at the end of the first year of English language instructions in a scuola media. Experience. The teacher is calling the class to order as we find seats toward the back of the room. He has placed a big map of the USA in the front of the classroom. He asked the students to open their books to a certain page number. The lesson is entitled Looking at the Map. As the students are called on one by one, they read a sentence from the reading passage at the beginning of the lesson. The teacher points to the part of the map the sentence describes after each has read a sentence, and the passage begins. This is the continuation. We are looking at the map of the United States of America. Canada is the country to the north of the United States, and Mexico is the country to the south of the United States. Between Canada and the United States are the Great Lakes. Between Mexico and the United States is the Rio Grande River. On the east coast is the Atlantic Ocean, and on the west coast is the Pacific Ocean. In the east is a mountain range called the Appalachian Mountains. In the west are the Rocky Mountains. After the students finish reading the passage, they are asked if they have any questions. A student asks what a mountain range is. A mountain range is a series of mountains or hills. The teacher turns to the whiteboard and draws a series of inverted cones to illustrate a mountain range. The student nods and says, I understand. Another student asks what between means. The teacher replies, You are sitting between Maria, Pia, and Giovanni. Paula is sitting between Gabriela and Sitina. Now, do you understand the meaning of between? The student answers, Yes, I understand. And this has been the flow of their conversation. The direct method, also referred as the natural method, started with Francois Wayne. Francois Wayne is a teacher of Latin who lived in France and was picked by Berlitz and Cuvier in the 19th century. It became very well known in the United States through its use by Cuvier and Maximilian Berlitz because of their successful commercial language schools. And the main goal for a teacher in their school is students will learn to communicate in the target language. The direct method it is also known as conversational method or natural method. It was developed by Maximilian Berlitz 1852 to 1921 towards at the end of the 19th century as a reaction to the dissatisfaction with the grammar translation method. The principles and procedures implemented in their school are: first, classroom instructions were conducted exclusively in the target language. Second, only everyday vocabulary and sentence were taught. Third, oral communication skills were built up and a carefully graded progression and organized around questions and answer exchanges between teachers and students in small intensive classes. Fifth, grammar was taught inductively. Sixth, new teaching points were introduced orally. Seventh, concentrate vocabulary was taught by association of ideas. Eighth, both speech and listening comprehension were taught. 9. Correct pronunciation and grammar were emphasized. The example of this is translation isn't allowed, or it refers to the native language, or the message is explained through direct demonstrations without any translation. The direct method was established in Germany and France around 1900. It appeared as an answer to the shortcomings of the grammar translation method. It is a method for teaching foreign languages that uses the target language, discarding any use of mother tongue in the classroom. And what is the definition of direct method? In teaching, a language is directly establishing an immediate and audiovisual association between experience and expression. Words and phrases, idioms and meanings, rules and performances through the teacher's body and mental skills, without any help of the learner's mother tongue. And the goals of direct method is to develop in response to the grammar translation method, which involve very little spoken communication and listening comprehension. The primary objective of the direct method was to teach L2 learners how to use language for communication purposes. And the focus of direct method is in the classroom environment, where not one word of the student's native language is spoken. The focus is not on grammar, but instead of learning through listening and speaking. And hindi lang grammar translation method yung nakaranas ng parang criticism, because there is a time also in the past that direct method is criticized also. Because based on more academically proponents of the reform movement criticized the direct method. Based on them, a represented product of enlightened amateurism, it was largely dependent on the teacher's skills rather than the textbook, and not all teachers were proficient enough in the foreign language to adhere to the principles of the method.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Janelle Fansengibay from 2B1. I'm here to report some reviewing techniques. Reviewing techniques are some teaching methods that you may use for your teaching approach. Reading aloud. Reading aloud to children gives them the opportunity to try on the language and experience of others. It helps them make connection with their lives and inform their view of themselves and others. So students can have their turn reading a section of passage or dialogue out loud. After their turn, the teacher uses gestures to make the meanings clear. Question and answer exercise. Question and answer sessions will let you know where your students are in terms of their understanding of lesson concepts. Sometimes, however, these sessions can go flat. Students can tune out, opt out, or play dumb as a way of getting out of participating. Question and answer exercise. The teacher can use this method to ask each and everyone, and the students as well answer them. Getting students to self-correct. Self-correction is when learners correct themselves instead of teacher doing it. Teacher can involve learning in self-correction to different degrees by giving learner more or less guidance as to the location and nature of their errors and examples of good use of language to compare their own. The teacher repeat the answer of the students, then uses a questioning voice to the students that gives a signal for the students to know what or his or her answer, to know rather that his or her answer are incorrect. Next, conversation practice. The teacher asks students questions about the target language which they have to understand fully to answer. Conversation practice. The teacher gives example of a question and later the students were asked to give a sample question on their own using the same structure. Fill in the blank exercise. The primary goal of fill in the blank is to encourage learners to apply this knowledge they have already acquired. Fill in the blanks questions are not opinion based, which means the learner must be able to use correction they have mastered during the lesson to correctly answer the question. This techniques has been discussed in the grammar translation method, but differs in its application in direct method. Dictation. Dictation is defined as giving orders authoritatively or saying or recording words with the intent what they will be written down later. The teacher reads the passage 3 times so that the students will have time to check if their works are correct. Map drawing. Include as one of the techniques used. The students are given a map that is a name and if each of the students will be given the chance to find and label the spot the teachers tell. Now, this technique uses listening comprehension and familiarization. They can label the map correctly if they clearly followed all the instructions. Paragraph writing. The teacher asked the students to write a paragraph in their own words. So the class were asked to do an essay about the lesson. That's all. Thank you.
So now, let's move to another technique in audiolingual method. It is the multiple slot substitution drill. This drill is similar to the single slot substitution drill. The difference is that the teacher gives cue phrases one at a time that fit into different slots in the dialogue. For example, the teacher would say that the cat is under the table and the student will repeat it. So, the teacher would blank some words or delete some words and the teacher would say that the dog chair. Then the student will fill the slots or in the dialogue line. So the student will say that the dog is under the chair or the dog is over the chair. And another example is the teacher said chimpanzee sofa. So the student will fill the slot in the dialogue. The student will just say that the chimpanzee is under the sofa. So the student must recognize what part of the speech each cue is, or at least where it is fits into the sentence, and make any other changes such as subject-verb agreement. Then say the line fitting the cue phrases into the line where it belongs. So let's move to another technique. Another technique in audiolingual method is transformation drill. What is transformation drill? The student practice to change the sentence pattern in some ways specified by the teacher. This could be changing the verb tense, changing an affirmative sentence to a negative sentence, adding an adverb, switching words, or changing the register of a sentence. For example, make the sentence in question. The cat is under the table. So the student will make the sentence in a question way. So the student will say, is the cat under the table? Another example, make the sentence in past tense. Hannah is fixing her hair. So in past tense, the student will say that Hannah fixed her hair. So now, let's move in question and answer drill. This drill gives students practice with answering questions. The student should answer the teacher's question very quickly. For example, the teacher will ask, where is the cat? The student will answer that the cat is under the table. What did Hannah do to her hair? The student will answer that Hannah fixed her hair. So let's move. Teaching techniques. techniques in audiolingual method. So use minimal pair. Thus, teacher works with pairs of words which differ in only one sound. For example, the cat, the pet one, and the cut, which means cutting something, or ship, the ship or the animal one, or the ship like cruise ship. So the student are first asked to perceive the difference between the two words and later to be able to say the two words. The teacher select the sound to work on after she has done a constructive analysis, a comparison between the student native language and the language they are studying. So let's move to the other. Complete the dialogue. In completing the dialogue, the teacher will their selected words are erased from dialogue students have learned. Student completed the dialogue by filling the blanks with the missing words. It is like the multiple slot substitution, but I think it is so. For example, in complete the dialogue, for example, the lines in Harry Potter said by Sirius Black, "The ones that love us never really leave us." So the student will memorize that, and later on, some of the lines will be in blanks or deleted. So the student will eventually fill it. For example, I would say the ones, then the later part will be said by the student. So last one, we have grammar game. So in grammar game, one of the best example is supermarket alphabet game. It is one described in this chapter. The games are designed to get students to practice a grammar point within a context. Students are able to express themselves. So an example, the first person would choose something you or would like to buy from the market, beginning with letter A and so on with the alphabet. So for example, I went to the supermarket. I bought apple. So the next person or the next student will repeat and add something beginning with letter B. For example, I went to the supermarket. I bought some apple and some bacon. So on. The game continues until someone can't remember all the item bought or cannot think of the next letter. Notice that this game has a lot of repetitions. So notice that there is a lot of repetition in this game. So that's all for today. Thank you.
Good day everyone. We will discuss the lesson for Larsen Freeman's audiolingual method. What is audiolingual method? ALM is an oral-based approach to drill students in the use of grammatical sentence of patterns. In ALM, actions and pictures are used to give meaning otherwise. It also emphasizes spoken language, and the use of language is a habit that needs a lot of practice. ALM is also a teaching foreign language based on behaviorist theory. So ALM is following the principles of behaviorism. It is more focused on spoken language and oral communication. So before, with the outbreak of World War II, armies needed to become orally proficient in the languages of their allies and enemies as quickly as possible. So this teaching technique was initially called as Army Method and was the first to be based on linguistic theory and behavioral psychology. So this audiolingual method was widely used in the 1950s and 1960s, and the emphasis was not on the understanding of words, but rather on the acquisition of structures and patterns in common everyday dialogue. ALM has its objectives. First is to be able to use the target language communicatively and to overlearn target language without stop thinking. So this audiolingual method or ALM has its proponents. First is Charles Fries. The audiolingual method for teaching ELLS is an oral-based method that was researched by Charles Fries of the University of Michigan in 1945. The underlying ideals of this method come from the study of structural linguistics. Second is B.F. Skinner. Later in its development, principles from behavioral psychology were incorporated. It was thought that the way to acquire the sentence patterns of the target language was through conditioning.
Good afternoon. My name is Markel S. Garcia. I am one of the reporters in Techniques in Audiolingual Method. So the first one is the dialogue memorization. The students memorize the dialogues through mimicry. In the ALM, certain sentence, pattern, and grammar points are included within the dialogue. These pattern are points and points are later practiced in drills based on the lines of the dialogue. So, sinasabi po dito that according to Larsen Freeman, dialogues or conversations between two people are often used to begin new lesson. Therefore, in here, through process of mimicry, students can able to memorize their dialogues. For example, a teacher will give a short dialogue that will be played by two characters. The one will act another is his or her student, and the one will be her. After the student learn or memorize his or her line, they will switch their roles and memorize other person's part. So in this process, students can able to practice and learn not just their dialogues, but also some sentence pattern and grammar points. So number 2 is the backward build-up drill. The teacher will break down the line into several parts. It is usually start at the last phrase of the line. So, the second technique, which is also known as backward build-up expansion drill. So, in here, when students are, for instance, are having a hard time pronouncing certain sentence or phrases, the teachers usually starts at the last phrase of the line. And repeating the line or phrase where the students are having difficulties pronouncing it. Therefore, by repeating that line slowly, students can able to repeat the entire phrase. So, in this technique, for able to teach the students in learning specific phrases, the teacher will start at the end part of the sentence and work backward from there. So, number 3 is the repetition drill. The students are asked to repeat the teachers as accurately and as quickly as possible. So, the third one is a technique where the students are asked to imitate or repeat what the teacher says. This technique is applicable in a whole class discussion or one with small one. So, for example, the teacher will say, "She's a doctor." It can be repeated once or twice depending on his or her students. So, in this process, the students can able to retain information by simply imitating someone. And the fourth one is the chain drill. A chain drill allows some controlled communication. So, The fourth technique is somehow relatable to repetition, but in here, the teacher will form the students around the room one by one, ask and answer question of each other by same question given by the teacher. So for example, the teacher will first greet the one beside him, and once the student responds, the student will also do the same, and the chain continues. Chain drill is a helping tool for teachers to check students' speech. So, the fifth one, which is the single slot substitution drill. So, the teacher says a line, usually from the dialogue. Next, the teacher says a word or phrase. The students repeat the line the teacher has given them. So, single slot subdivision drill is a technique where the teacher will get some line, usually from the dialogue, and then the teacher will say a word or phrase called cue. In here, cue stands as the last word from the given line, and students will substitute the cue to make new meaning in a certain line. So, before they substitute words, they need to repeat the line so they can able to proceed in substituting or filling the last line. For example, the teacher will say, "The cat is under the table." So first, the student will repeat what he or she says. And then, after repeating this, it is now the student's turn. For instance, the student will say, "The cat is under the chair." Simple, but the students can gain knowledge.